The mist clings to the valley like a shroud, curling and writhing through the broken remnants of wooden palisades. Each tendril slides over splintered gates and rotting earthworks, lingering where dew has turned the mud to slick glass, reluctant to let go of the ruins it enfolds. It drapes over every fallen banner, every shattered wheel, every splintered shield abandoned in the night. Men stir within this ghostly silence, shadows among shadows, their movements deliberate, cautious, as though the act of breathing too loudly might invite calamity. The chill of dawn bites through their coarse tunics and mail, the cold seeping beneath layers of leather and iron, finding the tender flesh beneath. Their hands tighten around pitted swords, splintered shields, each weapon an extension of their bodies, a tether to life and death alike. Even in this quiet, the hills seem to pause, holding their breath, waiting, listening for the first sign of approaching doom. Somewhere far beyond the fog, a sound begins, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, the deep, resonant thrum of hooves against hardened soil. A low, rolling cadence, like the earth itself groaning in anticipation. It grows, steadily, a sound that vibrates in the chest, rattling the teeth and tightening the stomach. The men stiffen, muscles coiling beneath armor, senses straining to catch the outlines of the unseen. Each heartbeat is measured against the rhythm of approaching terror. Eyes dart from the fractured palisades to the distant trees, searching for shapes that might signal the enemy's advance. Some fingers tighten around hilts, knuckles whitening, while others tremble, caught between the inevitability of the coming clash and the raw, unspoken fear that feeds the soul. There is no courage here that can mask the truth. Death is coming, and it will be merciless. The air itself is thick with the scent of wet earth and iron, of smoke from torches left burning in the ruins of a failed night raid. The acrid tang curls into nostrils and throat, carrying the memory of past battles, the residue of fire and splintered wood. Somewhere, a raven caws, a hollow sound swallowed almost immediately by the oppressive silence of the valley. The wind carries whispers of the dead, sighing through trees stripped bare by winter, drifting across mud and stone, stirring memories in the minds of those who still breathe. Even the oldest warriors, their faces lined and scarred by countless campaigns, shiver involuntarily, feeling the weight of history pressing upon them, heavy as the armor they wear. A young squire leans against a frost-hardened wall, his fingers tracing the grooves of worn stone, seeking some tactile proof that the world has not entirely fallen into chaos. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and awe, scan the valley. He imagines the cries that will soon echo through the hills, the clash of steel, the roar of riders, the fall of men whose names will never be sung. Banners droop under the weight of dew, fluttering listlessly like exhausted birds. Their colors faded, symbols of long-forgotten lords trembling in the ghostly wind. The squire's breath comes fast, clouding the air, his heartbeat a relentless drum beneath the chill. In the firelight of castles and halls, he has heard tales of bravery, of glory etched in golden song. But here, in the trembling gray before the storm, he feels the truth. Some battles leave no glory, only scars invisible to the eye, etched deep into the marrow and memory. The distant clash of metal begins, tentative at first, like the scratch of a quill across parchment. Then it rises a crescendo of sound that rattles the valley, shakes loose the last remnants of calm. Shields splinter, swords strike, and the air is alive with tension, thick and almost viscous. Anticipation, terror, and awe coalesce into a single, unyielding weight pressing against the chest. Each man's pulse races in tandem with the rhythm of approaching death. Even the earth seems to quiver beneath the grinding wheels of war machines moving through the fog, their skeletal forms grotesque, monstrous against the pale light of morning. The valley is no longer a passive stage. It has become a witness, a participant, holding its breath as the drama unfolds. Through the thinning veil of mist, the enemy emerges. Jagged silhouettes of armored riders, massive war machines with iron wheels grinding against stone, and soldiers clad in steel that glints with a terrifying coldness, advance as if the valley itself has summoned them. Each motion, precise and deliberate, carries a weight of inevitability. The men ready themselves, muscles taut, eyes narrowing, senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. This is more than battle. It is a test of endurance, a crucible of spirit, a reckoning. Every breath drawn here feels heavy, filled with the knowledge that only some will leave the valley whole, and fewer still unbroken in spirit. Yet even in the shadow of this gathering horror, there is a strange, flickering beauty. The sun, pale and diffused, breaks through the mist in a single slanted beam. It glints off helmets, axes, and blades, turning cold metal into something almost sacred. In that shimmer, the squire catches a fleeting understanding. Bravery is not in the deeds sung by bards, not in gilded manuscripts, but in the quiet, persistent act of standing, of facing the inevitable, and choosing to endure. Even now, in the grasp of fear, the recognition of duty and sacrifice sparks in his chest. It is fragile, ephemeral, and yet heavier than the steel he holds. The men shift, tightening grips, exchanging wordless glances. Some whisper prayers to gods who may not answer. Others murmur names of loved ones, imagining their faces in the darkness, in the safety of distant homes. Every man is caught between the known and the unknown, between life as it has been and life as it may never be again. The valley itself seems to echo their tension, every leaf trembling in the wind, every drop of dew vibrating with the heartbeat of the land. The first cries of the wounded, muffled and far away, travel across the fields, carried by wind and mud, marking the beginning of a day that will be remembered not in chronicles, but in memory and flesh. And then it begins, the first strike sudden and terrible. A war horn pierces the stillness, tearing across the valley like the scream of a fallen god. Iron strikes iron, and men fall. Horses rear and scream, their hooves smashing into shields and bodies alike. The ground erupts in mud, blood, and chaos. Each clash, each cry, each desperate shove of man against man becomes a hymn to survival. The squire's eyes widen as he witnesses the dance of life and death, a rhythm dictated by instinct and steel, by terror and courage entwined. Mud flies, boots slip, and yet the rhythm persists. Men rise again, even as the fallen are dragged aside, their cries swallowed by the relentless march of combat. The squire catches glimpses of human endurance at its rawest. A soldier lifting a brother from the dirt, another swinging a broken sword with defiance against a mounted foe. These acts, small and fleeting, shimmer like embers in the darkness of blood and smoke, fleeting proofs that even amidst despair, the pulse of humanity persists. As the battle swells, the valley becomes a living thing. The fog twists, curling around bodies and trees, carrying with it the smell of wet steel, blood, and sweat. The squire feels the valley's heartbeat, synchronized with his own, a relentless drum that measures the cost of courage. The banners, once sagging and forlorn, now tremble with motion, stirred by the wind and the clash of armies. They are not merely cloth. They are symbols of what men fight for, fragments of identity, memory, and honor caught in the whirlwind of fate. In a fleeting moment, the squire glimpses the sacred and the profane, a knight shielding a fleeing comrade, a veteran raising a fallen banner against impossible odds, a child's prayer whispered beneath the roar of hooves. These fragments of humanity shine, briefly, like stars caught in a storm. He senses that these are the true stories of war, not the glorified victories chronicled by kings, but the acts of devotion, courage, and despair that live in bones, in marrow, in memory. Hours pass like minutes, each instant heavy with consequence. The valley is scarred, the earth churned to clay, the air thick with the remnants of battle. Yet even in the carnage, life persists. The men, bloodied and battered, cling to each other, to the rhythm of survival, to the fragile sense of purpose that has carried them this far. The squire stands, trembling, heart hammering, and understands that this is the world he has inherited, a place where beauty and horror are inseparable, where courage and fear are entwined, and where every act, every choice, leaves an imprint upon the land and the soul. And as the mist begins to rise once more, revealing distant ridges where unseen foes await, the squire tightens his grip on his sword. He senses, in a marrow of his bones, that the day has only begun, that the valley holds more trials yet to come, and that the stories of this dawn will linger, not in song or parchment, but in the quiet endurance of those who dare to stand. The wind carries a whisper through the trees, a promise and a warning, and in that instant he feels both the weight and the sacredness of what it means to survive. The valley exhales. For a brief heartbeat, there is silence. Then, faintly, the low rumble begins anew, the distant, inexorable promise of what waits beyond the mist. And in that suspended hush, the squire knows with unspoken clarity, this world of mud, steel, smoke, and blood is both cruel and holy. Each man, each boy, will carry forward the story in his bones, and the valley will remember, long after the banners sag and the fog has lifted, the echo of courage and fear, the pulse of life, and the imprint of memory. A bell tolls somewhere far off, muffled by the dense, frost-laden forest. Its sound trembles through the air, curling over frozen streams and icy roots, stirring the dead leaves into trembling shadows. Smoke spirals from distant cottages, thick and sweet with the scent of burning pine, drifting lazily into the pale, reluctant sun, which glints through the skeletal branches as though hesitant to witness the calamity approaching. Somewhere in the gloom, a raven croaks, a black note cutting across the wind like a herald of misfortune. The world seems to pause in that note, holding its breath as if it knows what is to come. The commander moves along the line of his men, his shoulders stooped beneath the weight of sleepless nights and unspoken grief. His gaunt face is a map of sorrow, etched in furrows and frostbite, eyes hollow yet searching, counting the living and already mourning the fallen. His fingers brush against the fraying braid of a banner, its threads loosened, fading, like the hope that clings stubbornly to the edges of his heart. Each soldier stands rigid, a fragile pillar against the looming storm, the smell of damp earth and sweat mingling with the copper tang of old blood that hangs in the forest air like a memory that refuses to fade. The trees loom around them, ancient sentinels, their limbs twisted into silent accusation. Shadows twist and stretch across the undergrowth, each branch a potential spear, each rustle a whisper of death. The wind carries a low moan, curling around trunks and branches, as if the forest itself has learned the language of fear. Dogs stir in the village below, whines and shivers traveling across the frozen ground, their instincts brushing against something older than memory. Somewhere in the shadows, a fox darts past, its fur a flash of russet, vanishing like a thought before it can be named. Soldiers hunch around charms and tokens, whispers escaping trembling lips, prayers half-remembered, saints' names lost in the cold, each clutching a relic as though it were the only thing separating them from oblivion. Fingers wrap around crosses carved from bone, amulets of silver dulled with soot and age, small icons that speak of distant, unseen gods. Their breaths fog the morning air, spirals of white that vanish before the light can touch them. The cold seeps into every joint, every muscle, yet they stand rigid and unyielding, driven by something older than fear. Survival, duty, a flicker of loyalty that will not die. A young archer kneels among them, bowstring taut, knuckles whitening as she tests the sinew. Her eyes flicker through the branches, tracing shapes that may never exist. In the dark spaces between the trees, she imagines the eyes of her mother, staring from a hearth far away, warm and unknowing. The fear in her chest is a living thing, coiling through her ribs, and she swallows it down, shaping it into focus. She will not flinch. She cannot. The lives of her companions, the fragile thread of the village's future, rest in the pull of her hand, the arc of a single arrow. The enemy waits in the tree-line, moving like smoke, silent as shadow, patient as the night. Their steps disturb the frost, crack twigs beneath soft-soled boots, yet the sound is almost swallowed by the murmur of the forest. Time slows. Every breath stretches taut, every heartbeat hammers against ribs as though demanding recognition. The forest itself seems to recoil, leaves stilling, branches holding their weight as though afraid to betray the secret of what is coming. Even the air thickens, pregnant with the scent of pine, blood, and fear, a mixture that clings to the tongue and throat of those who stand to face it. The commander raises his hand, pale against the winter light, a gesture more of ritual than command. His lips part, but no words are spoken. Prayer is unnecessary here. His soldiers know the rhythm by heart, the silence a language of its own. The line bends slightly with the weight of expectation, each man and woman a thread in the tapestry of survival, each a fragment of a story that may never be told. From the tree-line, a step breaks. The snow beneath a boot sings, then another, and another, until the forest seems to pulse with movement, as if it has drawn a breath it can no longer contain. The young archer's bow trembles beneath her fingers, and for a single moment, she imagines the arrow itself suspended midair, a bridge between life and memory. In that suspended breath, she feels the entirety of her lineage, the blood of hunters and soldiers and mothers pressing into her hands, guiding her aim. The enemy emerges, not with a roar, but with quiet inevitability, their armor catching shards of morning light, their eyes mirrors of the same fear and resolve that grips the commander's men. Each step is deliberate, a drumbeat echoing in the heart of the forest, a rhythm that promises pain, loss, and the faintest glimmer of glory. The trees, so long silent witnesses, now watch with an intimacy almost human. Leaves quiver, frost shatters underfoot, and the wind twists between trunks like a sigh of resignation. And yet, amid the encroaching menace, there is fragile beauty. Smoke drifts past, a ghostly ribbon against the dark green of the forest. Sunlight splashes in shards across frozen streams. A deer pauses at the edge of a clearing, nostrils flaring, eyes wide with terror and curiosity, before melting back into the shadows. Life persists, indifferent to the human reckoning unfolding beneath it. The commander steps forward, hand resting on the hilt of his sword, fingers brushing the banner once more. His breath clouds the cold air, and for a heartbeat, he allows himself the memory of what he fights for. Not land, nor glory, but the fragile warmth of home, of hearth, of those who sleep unaware of the blood soon to stain the earth outside their doors. He imagines their faces, soft with trust, and lets that vision sharpen his resolve. Then the first arrow sings, a thin silver line cutting through the fog, tearing the morning stillness. It lands with quiet inevitability, finding flesh, finding fear, finding the invisible thread that binds courage to survival. The line of soldiers moves as one, steps synchronized, breaths measured, hearts pounding in a chorus matching the forest's pulse. Each clash, each cry, each shuffle of feet through snow becomes part of a living tableau, captured not on parchment, but in the mind and memory of those who endure. The battle spreads like fire. Torches flare, reflecting off metal and snow, and the wind carries the scent of pine smoke and iron alike. Shadows stretch and contort as men fall, arrows arc and splinter, and the forest becomes sanctuary and prison alike. Whispers of prayer mingle with grunts of effort, the crack of wood, the tearing of cloth. Time fractures, elongated and intimate, until each moment feels like an eternity. A young soldier slips on ice, skidding into the snow. Another extends a hand to pull him up, their eyes meeting, a silent communion of fear and hope. A banner falls, catching on a branch, fluttering like a wounded bird before tearing free. And somewhere, a dog howls, a solitary note that slices the tension, echoing like a lament. The young archer releases arrow after arrow, her knuckles raw, arms trembling with fatigue, but her gaze never wavers. Every shot carries the weight of memory, every pull of the string a testament to survival, every arrow a line drawn between life and death. Behind her, the commander fights with a cold precision, his sword a reflection of the forest itself, unyielding, sharp, and inevitable. Hours seem to pass in seconds. Blood glitters in the frost, metallic in the morning sun. Smoke curls lazily over broken branches. Soldiers collapse, exhausted, weeping and praying. The enemy falters, then surges again, and the rhythm repeats. Clash, cry, silence. Each repetition frays the edges of hope, and yet each repetition also affirms life, stubborn and unbroken, rising against despair. Finally, the forest exhales. Movement slows, then ceases. Survivors stand trembling, counting the living, tracing the line between past and future in snow-stained earth. The young archer lowers her bow slowly, eyes wide with the shock of endurance. The commander glances over the line, shoulders tight with exhaustion, banner frayed and wind-tossed, a symbol of fragile hope that still endures. Silence falls, thick and potent, broken only by the faint moan of a dying wind. Somewhere distant, the bell tolls again, fainter, mourning what has been lost and what cannot be retrieved. The forest shivers, acknowledging the moment now belonging only to memory, blood, and myth. The air smells of pine, snow, smoke, and iron, a testament to the passage of life and death, courage and fear, hope and despair. And in that silence, a question lingers. Who will remember? Who will tell the story beyond the frozen streams and trembling trees? The forest holds its breath still, and the living do the same, knowing the path ahead is both peril and promise, that what has been endured is only the beginning. The sun rises a fraction higher, glinting through skeletal branches, and somewhere beyond, a torch burns, unextinguished, waiting to carry the story forward into the next chapter, into the next breath of history, into myth yet to be written. Rain falls in sheets, pounding the stone walls of the besieged keep, a relentless percussion that echoes in the marrow of every soul within. Each drop hammers the earth, hissing as it strikes puddles of mud and shallow pools of blood, carrying with it the scent of iron and decay. The walls, slick with water and centuries of soot, shiver under the assault of enemy siege engines, their iron teeth gnawing at timber with a slow, deliberate inevitability. Torches gutter in the wind and rain, their flames bending, black smoke coiling upward and vanishing into the night, illuminating faces etched with exhaustion, terror, and the grim determination of those who yet cling to life. Shadows crawl along stone corridors, coiling and uncoiling as if alive, whispering secrets of death yet to come. Behind the arrow slits, defenders crouch like hunted beasts, wet leather clinging to their skin, armor slick with rain. Hands, red and raw from the cold, grip bows and blades, knuckles whitening with the effort of holding on to life when all seems lost. Eyes scan the horizon, unblinking, desperate for patterns in the chaos outside, yet finding none. The sky is a roiling curtain of gray, streaked with lightning that momentarily illuminates the battlefield, revealing siege towers leaning like monstrous insects over the mud, ladders bristling with soldiers hungry for conquest. Every footstep of the enemy pounds against stone like a drum of inevitability, a relentless march of mortality. The commander stands near the walls, his cloak soaked through, heavy as iron chains, clinging to him with the weight of dread and duty. Each breath steams in the cold air, visible and fleeting, like a life that might vanish at any moment. His eyes, sharp and calculating, watch the shifting shadows of siege engines and the glint of steel glimpsed through the storm. Hands blackened by soot and mud tighten around the hilt of his sword, a small island of control in the chaos. Around him, the soldiers whisper prayers, mutter curses, speak to gods whose names they barely know. Yet each sound carries a desperate hope that fate might yet bend to human will. Beneath the stairs, a child huddles against the damp stone, clutching a wooden doll whose paint is chipped and peeling. Its face, once cheerful, now wears the pallor of long nights and fear. The child's small fingers tighten around it, as if drawing strength from his fragile figure. Above, the metallic chorus of the siege rises, a symphony of terror, groaning timber, shattering stone, the hiss of molten metal, and the screams of men. The wind twists the sounds into something almost unrecognizable, a grotesque music that pierces through the rain and the soul alike. The child's wide eyes search for meaning, for pattern, for some comfort in the noise, but there is none. Only the rhythm of fear, each pulse a reminder of the fragility of life. Soldiers pace in narrow corridors, sharpening blades whose edges glint wetly in torchlight. Hands shake, hearts hammer, yet the work is precise. Some whisper prayers to gods long forgotten. Others murmur the names of loved ones left behind, of mothers and wives, brothers and sisters, a litany of what is at stake. Faces are pale, eyes wide with terror, reflecting flickering torchlight like mirrors of mortality. Rain drips from the ceiling onto shields, swords, and the stone floor, a cold, constant reminder that even in the warmth of fire, the storm penetrates all. A horse neighs somewhere outside, carried on the wind and rain, ethereal and hollow, a ghostly signal of the lives that hang by threads, of riders and soldiers who may never see the dawn. Its sound cuts through the cacophony of battle, reaching ears that strain to hear anything beyond the pounding of hearts and the relentless storm. The walls vibrate under the enemy's assault, each tremor a message. Death approaches, yet life stubbornly resists. Splintered wood and stone bear the marks of countless hands, sweat, and desperation, etched into their surfaces like hieroglyphs of struggle. And yet, within this storm of despair, there are sparks of defiance. A soldier rises from the mud, bow trembling, arrow knocked. He releases it into the rain, the shaft hissing through the air before finding its mark. A moment of victory, fleeting yet absolute, a testament to human stubbornness in the face of annihilation. Another drags a wounded comrade into the relative shelter of a doorway, whispering encouragement, offering warmth and hope, a small island of humanity amidst chaos. In each trembling hand, each breath drawn between terror and action, there is a story of resilience, a narrative of life that insists upon itself even as the world threatens to erase it. History may forget this battle. Its names may vanish, its heroes be reduced to ghosts. Yet the earth remembers, Stones bear the impressions of boots, mud absorbs the blood of the fallen, and the air hangs thick with the memory of screams, prayers, and fleeting laughter. Rain, ceaseless and unfeeling, washes over it all, carrying the memories into the soil, into the stone, into the very marrow of the keep. Life and death intertwine, inseparable, each breath a defiance of oblivion. The commander's gaze falls upon the child clutching the doll. In that moment, he sees what this battle truly represents. Not conquest or glory, but survival, memory, the persistence of humanity itself. He nods, almost imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement of courage in its smallest, purest form. For even in the mud, in the rain, in the tremble of hands and hearts, life asserts itself, defiant and eternal. Outside, the siege engines shift again, grinding against stone and timber, the sound resonant, metallic, a rhythm of destruction. Lightning flashes illuminating the battlefield in stark, white relief, revealing soldiers climbing ladders, axes raised, eyes wild with hunger for victory. The rain streaks the sky in silver threads, blurring the world into a swirl of shadow and light. Inside, soldiers clutch swords and shields, listening to the storm and the storm of the enemy alike. Every heartbeat is a drumbeat, every breath a protest against the dark. Yet in the chaos, there is beauty, not in triumph or conquest, but in the stubbornness of life. The child presses the doll closer, seeking comfort. The soldier steadies his arrow, aligning it with purpose. The commander lifts his head, eyes scanning the storm, feeling the pulse of life threading through mud and stone, terror and despair alike. This is the poetry of survival. Harsh, wet, relentless, yet alive. Each act of courage, each refusal to succumb, writes itself into the memory of the world, small yet indelible. Moments crystallize, the soldier's steady hand, a whispered prayer, a child's silent clutch on innocence. The storm rages, unrelenting, yet within the walls, life persists. Each pulse, each whispered breath, each trembling step asserts existence against annihilation. The keep may crumble, the rain may wash away tracks, yet these acts, these sparks of courage, persist in the memory of the earth, if nowhere else. The bells toll in the distance, faint and mournful, carried by wind and rain. They warn of reinforcements that will never come, of lives that hang by a thread. Yet within the walls, fear and courage mingle indistinguishably, inseparable as the rain and the mud. The keep trembles, battered but unbowed, a fragile sanctuary of human stubbornness and determination. The storm shows no mercy, yet within, life persists, defying the darkness, defying death, defying history itself. Through corridors slick with water, soldiers move with precision born of desperation, each step measured, each gesture deliberate. Faces reflect torchlight and fear alike, eyes wide, breath visible in the cold air. Some sing faint chants, voices trembling, others whisper the names of the fallen, honoring them in ways the world may never record. Outside, lightning illuminates the advancing enemy, monstrous shadows against mud and sky, each flash revealing the scale of the assault, the unrelenting drive of conquest. Inside, human resilience asserts itself in small acts. An arrow loosed, a comrade steadied, a whispered reassurance. The commander moves among his people, hands steady on hilt and shield, voice low but firm, grounding those who would otherwise be lost to fear. Each command, each gesture, is a thread tying the fraying tapestry of hope together. Rain runs down his face, mingling with mud and sweat, but he does not flinch. Around him, men and women cling to life with equal ferocity, finding strength in the shared terror, in the knowledge that the night is a crucible in which courage is forged. And in the quietest corners, small miracles persist. A child's eyes, wide with wonder and fear, reflect torchlight. A soldier pulls a fellow from the mud, bandaging wounds with trembling hands. The commander pauses, noting a small act of bravery, a glance exchanged, a word of comfort, a shield raised at the last moment. In these details, the heartbeat of humanity resonates, defiant and unbroken. Even as walls crack and rain pours, even as siege engines grind, these acts insist upon memory and meaning, whispering to the future that life endures. In the end, one moment crystallizes, a spark of courage, a flash of defiance in the heart of despair. It is fleeting, yet eternal, small yet monumental. Rain continues to pound, iron gnaws timber, and the keep shudders beneath the weight of inevitability. And yet, within, life persists. Each breath, each pulse, each trembling step resists oblivion. History may not remember this place, these people, this night, yet the earth does. Mud and stone, rain and blood, hold the memory of human stubbornness, the poetry of survival, the fleeting immortality of courage. As the storm rages, the chapter closes not with triumph nor defeat, but with the pulse of life asserting itself against all odds. Outside, the tempest will continue. Inside, fear and courage mingle until indistinguishable. Somewhere between the walls, in the mud, in the rain, in trembling hands and hearts, history watches silently, recording not glory, but the eternal spark of human endurance, fragile yet unyielding, fleeting yet eternal, small yet monumental. The wind tore across the shattered remains of the village, a relentless wail that carried with it the coppery sting of blood and the faint sweetness of scorched grain. Charred beams jutted from the earth like the broken limbs of giants, skeletal sentinels rising against a sky thick with smoke and sorrow. Puddles of rainwater lay scattered in the mud, black mirrors reflecting fragments of sky bruised by ash. The night moved through it all, each step a negotiation with the wet earth, each breath heavy with the scent of fire, death, and something else, something almost human, loss. His gauntlet hands gripped the hilt of his sword until the knuckles whitened, the steel heavier than his fear, heavier than the weight of what he had witnessed. Around him, the cries of men and animals drifted faintly on the wind, swallowed almost immediately by the earth that seemed to claim everything without question. Somewhere, a dog whimpered. Its mournful sound carried against the walls of ruin and into the hollow spaces of memory. Beyond the village, banners flapped in ragged defiance, signs of the enemy's presence, heralding a storm not only of wind and rain, but of fire and steel yet to come. The night could hear it in the distant clash of arms, the rumble of hooves on shattered ground, though the details were blurred by distance. It was the promise of more loss, the certainty that nothing here would remain untouched. Everywhere he looked, small objects lingered as ghosts of life. A broken comb, teeth splintered, the faint trace of hair still caught in its wood. A tarnished ring, its metal dulled by smoke, bearing the mark of love. A clay cup split in two, edges blackened and soaked through, still smelling faintly of the meal that had been its last purpose. Each object, minute and fragile, was a testament, a pulse of memory refusing to vanish entirely. The knight crouched beside the cup, letting rainwater drip from his helm onto his fingers, feeling the almost unbearable weight of unrecorded history pressing down upon him. He thought of the lives that would never be chronicled, the screams swallowed before they reached the page, the whispered prayers that would vanish into ash and mud. The wind shifted, carrying with it a sound beneath the howl, the faint stirrings of life that refused to bow entirely to death. A dog nudged the body of a child, tail wagging hesitantly, sniffing for warmth where there was none. A mother clutched a scrap of cloth to her chest, rocking herself gently, as if the rhythm of her own heartbeat could ward off the horror outside. A lone soldier crouched behind a collapsed wall, whispering a final prayer that the wind carried toward the heavens. It was resilience, fragile yet stubborn, threading itself through the ruin like roots forcing their way through stone. The night moved on, each step a negotiation with mud and memory. Rain slicked the ground beneath him, sucking at the soles of his boots. He passed through the shells of houses where walls had fallen inward, roofs open to the storm. Inside, fragments of domestic life lay scattered. A mother's loom, now splintered, children's toys blackened by smoke, a priest's missal, waterlogged and smeared, pages clinging to each other as though unwilling to separate from their faith. Each piece told a story, each a fleeting echo of laughter, prayer, or anger now silenced. The knight's chest ached with each discovery, the sorrow of 1,000 unnamed souls pressing against his ribs like the sword he carried. Above him, clouds swirled in shades of iron and bruised fruit. Wind twisted the enemy's banners into grotesque shapes that seemed to sneer at the desolation below. Far beyond, figures moved like shadows, indistinct yet purposeful, their intent as lethal as the storm rolling toward the village. The knight knew that beyond the horizon, fire and steel waited, ready to consume whatever remained. Yet even as the terror of what was coming gripped him, he could not stop noticing life. The faint rustle of feathers as a scorched bird lifted from the barn, wings cutting through smoke, a child clutching a fragment of bread, eyes wide and uncomprehending. The soldier's whispered prayer, tiny but insistent, carried across the ruins. In this desolate place, life and death coexisted in fragile equilibrium, neither yielding entirely to the other. The knight's mind wandered to the names that would never be spoken, the histories that would never be written. Fathers who would not return home, mothers who would never cradle their children, children who would never know what laughter meant. These lives, extinguished in silence, pressed upon him with a weight heavier than his armor. He imagined their last moments, the heat of the fire, the sharp crack of splintering wood, the agonized cries fading into rain. And yet, even amid the devastation, the world continued to breathe. The river ran, dark and indifferent. The wind moved relentlessly. The trees, stripped and blackened, still reached upward. He passed a farmhouse that had collapsed inward, the roof resting like a lid over the ashes of its former life. In the doorway lay a mother, eyes closed, hands clutching a child. Beside them, a scorched bundle of straw might have been a cradle. The knight knelt, the mud sucking at his knees, and in silence he traced a hand across the charred wood. Here was tenderness, fleeting and unbroken even in the shadow of annihilation. He felt the echo of a promise, unspoken, that no matter the cruelty of men, no matter the certainty of death, life could persist in the smallest, most stubborn gestures. The storm approached faster now, the wind whipping his cloak, lashing rain into his visor. The banners on the horizon snapped violently, each crack a drumbeat heralding the enemy's advance. He could hear the distant clamor of preparation. Horses stamped impatiently, armor clanged, men muttered prayers or curses depending on their temperament. And yet, amid all of this, there was still a rhythm in the ruins, the mother humming, the dog nudging the child, the whispered prayers, all threads of resistance, delicate but unyielding. The knight carried these threads with him, weaving them into the fabric of his own resolve. His reflection in the puddles along the mud-soaked road was fragmented, distorted by wind and ripple. In that broken visage, he saw not only the weight of what had happened, but the possibility of what might still be salvaged. Shadows of the fallen clung to him, silent companions, urging him forward. Each step was a negotiation between the past and the present, between grief and the stubborn insistence of life. The air was thick with ash and rain, but through it, the faint scent of earth and renewal persisted, reminding him that even in ruin, the world held the seeds of continuation. A lone tree, stripped bare by flame, stood sentinel at the village's edge, its skeletal branches clawing at the sky. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating its ragged silhouette, and for a moment, the knight saw the battlefield as it might have been, alive, chaotic, unyielding. In the thunder that followed, he could hear voices, phantoms of the past, lamenting, warning, praying. He pressed on, each step a vow not to let these lives, these whispered memories, vanish into nothingness. Every fallen roof, every broken tool, every charred fragment was a story he carried forward, a testament that terror would not entirely claim this place. Rain ran in rivulets down his faceplate, mingling with sweat and grime. He thought of the enemy beyond the horizon, banners snapping violently, and of the fire that would sweep through what remained. Yet even as fear pressed at the edges of his resolve, he felt the pulse of life, delicate and insistent, threading through the ruin. A bird, newly risen, sliced through the gray sky. A child, uncertain but alive, clung to a fragment of bread. A soldier, hidden among rubble, murmured prayers that would not be heard but would nonetheless matter. These were the flickers of defiance, and the night carried them as a shield. The village behind him was a skeleton, its history written in ash and mud. He looked back one last time, seeing the smoke curling upward, the wind stirring the debris, the smallest acts of resistance still burning quietly amid the devastation. In that place where terror and tenderness existed side by side, where stories would never be chronicled, yet lives persisted in secret, he felt the weight of eternity pressing down. And still, the world breathed, small and fragile, refusing to bow entirely to despair. The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of iron and fire. The knight tightened his grip on his sword, the rain driving into his armor like tiny daggers. Beyond the horizon, the enemy waited, yet in his chest burned something equally relentless. The quiet insistence that life endures, memory persists, and even in the shadow of annihilation, the pulse of the living cannot be entirely extinguished. He stepped forward, leaving the ruins behind, carrying the village, the mother, the child, and every unrecorded soul in his heart. For in this desolate place, amidst fire, ash, and blood, the world held its breath. Between life and memory, terror and tenderness, despair and resilience, it waited. And in that waiting, the knight found both his burden and his purpose. To witness, to endure, to carry forward the unspoken, the unseen, the unrecorded, into the chapters yet to come. Dawn creeps over the battlements like liquid gold, spilling its fragile light across frost-slick stones, glinting on swords that have lain cold since nightfall. The air bites at the lips, sharp with iron and smoke, carrying the tang of blood yet to be shed, of torches that smoldered through the darkness, and of steel left wet with the memory of death. Mist rises from the hills, drifting like ghosts across frozen fields, curling around the trunks of skeletal trees, and hiding the shapes of distant engines of war. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the faint groan of heavy wheels against hardened earth signals the presence of machines that hunger for stone and flesh alike. On the battlements, scouts hunch over the edges, eyes narrowed against the brilliance of the morning. Their breath escapes in fragile clouds, fading quickly into the cold air. Every step is deliberate, measured, footfalls muffled by frost-laden stone, hands tight around hilts and crossbows. Each carries a burden no ledger will record. The weight of witnessing horror yet to befall, the silence that follows every scream remembered from nights past, the quiet oath that they will endure. They watch the hills, tracing shadows, imagining the movement of unseen armies, the churn of hooves, the crash of trees felled to clear paths for siege engines. Each tremor beneath their feet, each distant echo of impact, vibrates through their bones, reminding them that the day will demand blood, and that courage alone may not suffice. Beneath the battlements, a young page kneels beside a fallen standard, its embroidered crest dulled by frost and rain. His small fingers brush the icy threads with trembling care, tracing shapes that tell stories no bard will sing. The house it represents has known triumph and ruin alike, and yet here it lies forgotten, silent except for the whisper of wind through frayed cloth. He imagines the lives that will vanish today, the deeds that will go unrecorded, the last breaths drawn in unseen corners of the battlefield. His chest tightens at the thought, not out of fear alone, but out of the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that to see is already to bear a fragment of history. The commander steps forward, boots striking stone in measured cadence, and the courtyard responds. Soldiers shift, armor sighing, chainmail clinking, leather belts groaning, a symphony of tension that fills the air like a slow drumbeat. Each movement is deliberate, shields adjusted, gauntlets tightened, pikes leveled with an almost ritual precision. There is no joy here, only focus, and a quiet understanding that every gesture carries consequence. The page watches them, small against the array of men, each soldier a living monument to fear transformed into resolve. He feels the invisible threads that bind them together, the bond forged in sleepless nights, in frost-bitten dawns, in the constant brush with death. Birds lift from the trees with sudden panic, their wings beating a frantic rhythm, their cries slicing the fragile quiet of dawn. For an instant, the world seems suspended, poised between the fragile calm of frost and the cruel inevitability of war. The page glances at a sword caught in the early light, its wet edge gleaming like liquid silver. In it, he sees the enormity of what is to come, not just the clash of steel, but the human lives it will touch, the families that will mourn in silence, the unspoken courage that will bind soldiers together when all else fails. Each sword, each shield, each fallen banner is a story. Most will be lost, but some will echo in memory, carried silently by those who survived. From the distant hills, a low rumble grows, subtle at first, then insistent. Earth trembles as unseen engines of war advance, a prelude to destruction. Catapults shift, their wooden frames groaning under tension, their stone projectiles arcs drawn in cruel perfection toward walls and men. The sound is hypnotic in its rhythm, a measured beat of doom that travels across fields and ridges, through frost and mud, into the hearts of all who await the first strike. Soldiers stiffen at the vibrations, hearts sinking to the pulse of the earth, knowing instinctively the weight of what is approaching. The frost underfoot begins to surrender to the weak warmth of the sun, melting into rivulets that run across stone, into cracks over leather, in a chainmail that has already been tested in countless skirmishes. Each drop is a tiny reminder that even the smallest thaw cannot soften the cruelty of what is to come. The page rises slowly, hands still resting on the fallen standard, and looks across the courtyard at the soldiers moving with quiet precision. In them, he sees the duality of fear and determination, the interplay of mortality and duty. Their eyes hold knowledge of countless nights spent with blood on their hands, of families left behind, of friends already gone. And yet, each of them stands ready, a testament to human endurance forged in adversity. The commander's gaze sweeps the horizon, tracing ridges, forests, and the ghosted shapes of approaching forces. His face is calm, but the air around him vibrates with anticipation. He does not flinch at the thought of death. He has long understood it to be a companion rather than an adversary. In his silence, soldiers find direction. The page finds example. The wind catches the banners still standing, lifting their colors against the growing light, reminding all who see them of the ideals for which they are willing to bleed. There is poetry in this terror, a cruel artistry in the assembly of men, metal, and earth ready to collide in violence. The first arrow cuts the sky, a silver streak that disappears into shadow. The birds scatter again, a chaotic flock marking the invisible line between calm and eruption. Smoke rises from distant fires, acrid and bitter, mixing with the earthy scent of frost trampled into mud. Every sound is magnified. The soft creak of leather, the distant shout of sentries, the faint groan of stone settling under weight, the whisper of wind carrying with it the taste of imminent suffering. The page feels it all in his chest, a rhythmic thrum that matches the drumbeat of fear and courage alike. Time stretches in this moment, elastic and tense. Soldiers adjust positions, every gesture a prayer, a vow, a declaration that they will endure what comes. The page senses their invisible bonds, forged in hardship, in sweat and frost, in the constant proximity of death. He imagines the lives that will vanish, the stories erased with each fallen man, the dreams that will crumble under siege, engines, and steel. And yet, in this crushing awareness, he feels the pulse of persistence, courage that does not seek recognition, loyalty that asks for no reward, resilience that survives in silence. It is a quiet defiance, a human anthem to be played in the smallest acts of endurance. Frost melts into rivulets that trace the contours of boots, armor, and stone. Light spills over the battlements, illuminating the soldiers, the page, and the shattered banners that cling stubbornly to poles. The ground, tremulous beneath them, seems to breathe with anticipation, a living witness to the inevitability of conflict. The page notices small details, the way a soldier's glove tightens around his sword, the slight shiver of a shield strap, the measured cadence of breath in the silent ranks. Each motion is a testament to preparation, a ritual that has been practiced for centuries in lands scarred by war. The sun climbs higher, revealing the distant shapes of armies arrayed beyond the hills. The page feels the enormity of what lies ahead, the impossible scale of human suffering and endurance. Every step taken by the soldiers will echo in lives lost and preserved. Every clash of blade and armor will write another line in an unrecorded history, another heartbeat in the shared memory of those who survive. He understands, though faintly, that these are the battles that define not kings or empires, but the marrow of human endurance, the quiet courage that lives in small acts of devotion and bravery. The commander lowers his hand, signaling the inevitable advance. Soldiers shift, moving with synchronized precision, each footfall a beat in a dirge of inevitability. The page watches, absorbing the weight of all that will happen, aware of the thin line between witness and participant. The day presses in, demanding blood, resolve, and above all, the courage to face what cannot be controlled. And yet, amid this growing chaos, there is a quiet pulse, a heartbeat of defiance that neither frost, iron, nor fire can extinguish. Some battles, he realizes, though unmarked in annals and untold in tales, will forever define the living. The courage that does not seek monuments, the loyalty that does not ask for remembrance, the resilience that persists in silence. All are here in this fragile dawn, in the frost and smoke and metal, waiting to be claimed by those who will endure. The page holds the fallen banner to his chest and feels, for the first time, that he is part of something larger than himself, a silent witness to courage and terror intertwined. And in this moment, he understands that history is not written only by the victors, but by those who stand steadfast in the cold light of dawn, who breathe through fear, and who endure because they must. The battlements shiver in the early sun, stones glinting with melted frost, steel catching light like liquid silver. Smoke drifts from distant fires, carrying with it the scent of impending loss. The commander signals again, more subtly this time, and the soldiers shift, preparing for the first clash. The page, kneeling once more beside the banner, feels the rhythm of the day, its fear, its hope, its impossibly fragile courage, settling into his bones. Somewhere in the distance, the rumble of unseen engines grows louder. Somewhere, wings beat frantically in the cold air. Somewhere, history is being carved in mud, blood, and resolve, waiting for those with the courage to witness it. And so, the dawn stretches, liquid and golden, over frost and steel, over banners and broken stones. Every shadow, every glint of sun, every whisper of wind carries with it the weight of stories unspoken, of bravery unseen, of fear confronted and endured. The page looks up, eyes wide, and for a moment, the enormity of the day presses fully upon him. And yet, beneath that weight, he feels a pulse, small but unyielding, a heartbeat of courage, of loyalty, of human endurance that no fire, frost, or steel could ever wholly destroy. The day will demand everything, but in this fragile, golden light, even the smallest hand can touch the marrow of history. The castle gate shudders beneath repeated blows, each strike trembling through the stone, each thud a drumbeat of doom against the hearts that beat behind it. The timbers groan as if alive, resisting yet knowing the inevitability of their fracture. Smoke curls upward from torches extinguished too soon, limning the hallways with pale, writhing shadows that lick the walls like hungry fingers. The acrid tang of smoldering thatch and scorched iron hangs heavy, clinging to the throats of those who remain inside, filling their lungs with the scent of a world collapsing in slow, merciless rhythm. Within the stone walls, women clutch children to their chests, small bodies trembling, their knuckles white and rigid, lips pressed together in silent prayers. They offer their faith to gods who may have already turned away. Their eyes dart to the floor, to the cracks in the stone, to each other, as if the flickering shadows might offer guidance or protection. Fathers, brothers, and untested knights adjust armor slick with mud and sweat, the iron biting into flesh, yet unyielding, each movement a desperate assertion of life. They whisper commands to one another, not loud enough to rise above the storm that batters the ramparts, their voices shivering as much as the beams above them. Outside, the enemy presses forward. Their war cries are muffled by the roar of wind, the grinding of wheels over cobblestone, and the howl of the storm that drives rain into every crevice of the castle. Each shout, each scream, is swallowed almost immediately by the clamor of battle, leaving only echoes that linger like ghostly reminders of death yet to come. Swords clash against shields with a ringing that cuts through the storm, a percussive cadence that marks the pulse of fear itself. The men on the walls respond with heavy thrusts and parries, sweat and blood mingling. Yet their motions betray the growing weight of despair. A young herald crouches in the shadows near the gatehouse, a horn trembling in his hands. He will never sound it, and he knows this. Each moment brings him closer to the edge of comprehension, the unfathomable terror of knowing what is coming while being powerless to halt it. His wide eyes flit from figure to figure, taking in the chaos in jagged fragments. A man's arm flung aside by the weight of an axe, the desperate scream of a mother caught between flight and shelter, the shadow of a dying man stretching impossibly across the rain-slick stones. He swallows a cry he does not wish to release, The world outside the walls presses in, a tide of fury and blood that will not pause. The clang of metal against metal resonates through the gatehouse, a symphony of suffering. Shields splinter under relentless assault, swords bite and tear through mail, and the walls themselves shiver with the force of repeated strikes. Somewhere, a bell tolls, though whether for alarm or for the dead is indistinct. The herald's ears ache with the constant roar, his heart hammering in rhythm with the pounding of the enemy on the gate. For a fleeting heartbeat, there is a pause. The enemy falters, retreating just long enough for a moment of eerie silence to settle across the battlefield. In that sliver of time, the world is reduced to the smell of wet stone and iron, the taste of smoke in the mouth, the cold bite of wind against the face, and the trembling of hands that hold, that pray, that attempt to shield what they cannot save. And in that fragile stillness, the herald glimpses a falcon perched on the crumbling parapet. Its eyes, sharp and unblinking, pierce the storm as though it sees not the chaos below, not the dying and the desperate, but something larger, something eternal. The bird tilts its head, as if aware of the unfolding fate of the fortress and the lives contained within. That gaze is a mirror, reflecting vigilance, patience, and the raw, uncompromising persistence of life in the face of annihilation. For a moment, the herald feels a strange solace, not comfort, not hope exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement that amidst the devastation, the instinct to witness, to endure, and to survive is unbroken. The walls quiver again. Torches gutter in the wind, sending tongues of fire that lick the ceilings before disappearing into smoke. The enemy presses closer, shields splintering under blows, boots sinking in a mud churned by rain and blood alike. Men grit their teeth and cry out, a chorus of determination wrapped in despair. Mothers press children against stone walls, whispering fragments of songs, half-forgotten prayers, their voices trembling but refusing to vanish entirely. Each life within the fortress is a defiance, a fragile yet unyielding testament to persistence. In the tower above, the commander watches with eyes narrowed against the storm. Each decision he makes, each order he issues, carries weight not only in the moment, but across the expanse of memory that may never forgive him. Should the walls fall, should the gates give way, the faces of those he seeks to protect will be etched into his mind forever. Their screams a relentless echo he cannot silence. And yet, he does not flinch. His hand tightens around the hilt of his sword, not for glory, not for honor, but for the small, human act of holding fast when all seems lost. The clash of battle ebbs and swells, a tide that refuses to settle. Somewhere near the stables, a horse neighs in terror, its cry cut short by the scream of a soldier fell before he can rise. The herald glimpses figures moving like shadows, soldiers, refugees, the wounded, the desperate, all bound by a single, fragile thread, the will to endure another breath, another heartbeat, another moment of defiance against an encroaching darkness. It is in these glimpses, these fleeting motions, that the story of the fortress is written, not in stone or timber, but in the quiet heroism of those who refuse to yield completely to fear. The rain thickens, turning streets into rivers of mud and blood, a mirrored chaos reflecting both sky and struggle. The wind drives against the castle walls, rattling loose stones and tearing at the banners that flap like wounded birds above the battlements. Soldiers slip, struggling to maintain footing, their armor heavy with water and exhaustion. In these conditions, courage becomes measured not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of standing when falling is easier, of gripping a shield while the tempest tears at your limbs, of holding a child's trembling hand while listening to the distant scream of your neighbor swallowed by steel. In the midst of turmoil, small acts of humanity appear. A knight lifts a fallen comrade, bloodied and broken, and drags him behind the safety of a shattered wall. A woman offers her cloak to a shivering child, wrapping warmth around fear itself. A priest murmurs blessings into the ears of those who cannot respond, his voice a fragile thread against the roaring winds and grinding wheels. These gestures are fleeting, almost invisible, yet they resonate louder than the clash of swords, speaking of defiance, compassion, and the fragile endurance of life in extremis. The herald cannot move, cannot breathe without tasting the storm in his mouth. Yet he watches, and in watching he begins to understand the strange poetry of survival. Fear and courage are not opposites. They are twins, born of the same heart, inseparable and entwined. Each heartbeat, each desperate breath, is a testament to that duality. He sees it in the father who swings a sword with shaking hands, in the mother who hums a lullaby over the cries of her child, in the soldier who locks eyes with an enemy and finds not hatred, but the mirrored terror of shared mortality. And all the while, the falcon waits. Its gaze cuts across the battlefield, impartial and unblinking. It watches as a man collapses beneath a fallen beam, as another lifts his fallen friend with trembling arms, as the storm continues to batter every wall and parapet. In that single, piercing gaze, the herald perceives something almost impossible, a patience that is neither hope nor fear, but an enduring witness to life itself, in all its horror, beauty, and chaos. The gate shudders again, and a crack runs through the wood, splitting a splintered section that groans under the weight of expectation and fear. The men brace themselves, gripping shields until their knuckles whiten, until their arms burn with strain. The enemy presses closer, relentless and unfeeling, driven by forces that the herald cannot name. And yet, the castle resists, each blow answered with stubborn defiance, each cry with a whispered prayer, each heartbeat with a will to endure one more instant in a world that seems bent on unmaking itself. The storm begins to ease, but the tension does not. Lightning illuminates the battlefield in strobe-like bursts, revealing figures frozen in mid-action, a knight caught in the act of swinging his sword, a mother lifting her child, an enemy soldier poised for a fatal strike. Time stretches and bends in the electric light, and the herald feels the weight of eternity compressed into these fleeting flashes. Each instant carries the gravity of history, each motion a thread woven into the tapestry of memory that will persist long after the stones have crumbled, long after the gates have fallen, long after the screams have faded. And then, as if called by some unseen hand, the falcon shifts. Its wings stretch in the wind, catching the rain in silver arcs. It rises, hovering above the battlefield, a solitary witness, unbound by walls or chains, untroubled by the tides of human panic. Its presence is a reminder that even in battles lost to memory, in moments of terror that dissolve into legend, there exists an enduring thread of vigilance. Humanity, in all its fear, all its pain, persists. The castle may tremble, the gates may splinter, the storm may rage, but there is always someone to witness, someone to endure, someone to carry forward the story of what was lost and what was faced. The herald watches the falcon, its wings catching the dying light, and in that flight finds a quiet clarity. Life continues in its myriad forms, despite the smoke, despite the clash of steel, despite the relentless press of the enemy. And in that clarity, the smallest of certainties emerges. That courage is not only the act of fighting, but the act of seeing, of bearing witness, of maintaining presence when all else falls away. The fortress holds, if only barely, and in its holding, it writes a quiet poem of survival against impossible odds. Outside, the battle rages onward, but within, a fragile calm lingers. The falcon drifts higher, a silent herald of endurance, and the castle, though battered and weary, breathes. Each life within it is a heartbeat against the storm, a reminder that even in history's darkest hours, there exists a thread of vigilance, a moment of grace, a witness to the enduring pulse of humanity amid the chaos. The storm is not yet over, but in the rising wind, the smoke, the cries, and the trembling hearts, there is a rhythm of defiance, a rhythm of presence, a rhythm that binds the living to the memory of the fallen, the remembered to the present, and the present to the eternal watchfulness of life itself. A torch trembles in the damp corridor of the monastery, its light quivering across stone worn smooth by centuries of hands, prayers, and sweat. Shadows coil along the walls like restless spirits, curling around carved pillars and over mosaics of dust and grime. Every surface seems alive with memory. The faint scratch of quill on parchment, the muffled shuffle of sandals across cold floors, the silent, patient echo of centuries waiting in the dark. Dust drifts lazily through the trembling flame, catching the light in motes that float like tiny phantoms, as if the air itself remembers all that has been lost here. The damp chill bites through robes, through skin, and into the bones, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of wet stone, smoke, and the acrid tang of burning wood. Every inhalation tastes of fear and prayer intertwined, a reminder that the sacred is never distant from peril. Monks huddle behind the cold pillars, their habits darkened by sweat and damp, their bodies pressed close to stone as though the walls themselves could shield them. Their whispers form a trembling chorus of hope and despair, half prayers, half confessions, each word a fragile tether to a God who feels distant, silent, yet inescapably present. Fingers clutch rosaries until the knuckles whiten. Lips move soundlessly, murmuring protective invocations. The novices tremble beside them, hearts hammering in rhythm with the distant thunder of hooves. Outside, the invaders approach, merciless, faceless, their presence announced by the cracking of whips and the thunderous beat of hooves against the frozen earth. Names that will never be written in chronicles belong to them, yet their terror is etched into the stone, the smoke, and the bones of those who wait in shadow. A novice crouches near a broken column, gripping a weathered cross so tightly that the wood cuts into his palm. The material is rough, familiar, and yet it offers only the illusion of safety. Sweat coats his hands and trickles down his spine as he strains to hear each movement outside, every crack of timber or whisper of fabric. The clash of steel against steel reaches even into the monastery's inner halls, muted groans of the dying carried on the wind. Fear and adrenaline tangle into a sharp, metallic taste at the back of his throat. Somewhere deep inside, he knows that the prayers, no matter how fervent, may not be enough. Yet he prays anyway, knuckles slick, eyes wide in the flickering torchlight. In a dim corner, the scribe bends over his parchment, quill scratching furiously to capture what no one else will survive to recount. Ink stains smear across the page as he records the fragments of chaos. A sword flashing in the torchlight, a mother shielding her child, a monk falling to the cold floor, clutching at invisible hands. He writes the horror, the courage, the quiet acts of defiance, each line a fragile barrier against oblivion. He knows these words may never leave the monastery, that fire or time may consume them, yet he continues. Each mark of ink is a heartbeat, a defiance, a whisper into eternity. The wind rattles broken shutters, carrying the cries of those unseen and unheard. Some are muffled, some sharp, some raw and pleading. A thief begs silently, a soldier curses, a mother screams for her child. The air carries these sounds like seeds, scattering them across corridors and courtyards, embedding them in the walls, the rafters, and the stones. The monastery listens, absorbing every note of sorrow, of terror, of fleeting courage. It is as though the building itself breathes, heavy with memory and anticipation, with lives measured not by their length, but by the intensity of what they endure. A bell tolls once, a low, mournful note vibrating through the hallways, through the corridors, into every corner of the sacred space. Twice, it tolls again, each peal deeper than the last, resonating with the fear, the faith, and the despair of those who remain. Even battles forgotten by history leave their traces. In the trembling hands, in the dust-laden corridors, in the scent of smoke that lingers long after fire has died. These traces endure not in chronicles or songs, but in memory, in stone, in air. They become immortal. The first invaders breach the outer gate. Shadows emerge against the mist, faces hidden beneath steel or hood, hands gripping blades that gleam faintly in torchlight. Leather boots scrape against stone floors, echoing in corridors already heavy with anticipation. Commands are shouted, voices harsh and foreign, slicing the night with authority and threat. The monks press closer to walls, hearts racing, breath shallow. Candles gutter and die, plunging corners into darkness that feels almost solid, almost sentient. Shapes flicker in this gloom, half seen, half imagined, each movement a potential death sentence. The novice tightens his grip on the cross, imagining it as armor against the world's cruelty. The wind swirls through broken windows, carrying ash, smoke, and the distant cries of the living and dying alike. One monk whispers a name, a prayer meant to hold off the inevitable. Another crosses himself, murmuring that God is here, that faith can shield them. The novice repeats these words silently, though each syllable trembles in the hollow of his throat. Steel flashes, a shadow moves across the walls, and the scribe continues to write, as though speed and ink might outrun the terror beyond the stone. Time stretches in distorted rhythm, each heartbeat amplified by fear, each sound lengthened by anticipation. The intruder steps into the scribe's corner, a figure framed in the doorway, steel glinting. The quill hovers over parchment, and for a moment, there is a stillness so profound that even the distant clash of swords seems to pause. The intruder hesitates, the candle flickers, and the scribe breathes, aware that he is both witness and participant, chronicler and survivor. Outside, hooves drum relentlessly. The invaders advance unbroken, unyielding. The air carries the metallic scent of blood and steel, the acrid tang of fire and fear. The monks tighten their huddled forms, silent prayers mingling with tremors of terror. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, distant, mournful, a reminder that even the most violent nights leave traces. Each stroke reverberates through stone, air, and flesh. A novice glimpses a fallen figure across the hall, a monk sprawled upon the cold floor, lips moving silently in prayer. He kneels briefly beside him, pressing a hand to a lifeless one, feeling the warmth leave with a slow, inevitable sigh. The novice's own pulse pounds in his ears as he turns back to the corridor, knowing the world outside is relentless, unyielding, and that even walls cannot protect against all violence. The scribe's quill scratches feverishly, documenting acts of courage and despair. A soldier dragging the wounded, a mother shielding a child, a monk offering bread to one last survivor. Ink flows, blotting and bleeding into the parchment, as though the chaos itself seeps into the record. His hand shakes, but he writes, for to remember is to resist erasure, to assert that lives mattered, if only to the stone and smoke that bear witness. The wind moans through shattered windows, rattling chains, scattering embers, carrying with it the cries of the unseen and unrecorded. Outside, hooves and shouts fade into fog. Inside, the monastery exhales a slow, tremulous breath, carrying the lingering scent of fear, sweat, and candle smoke. Candles flicker back to life, torchlight dances on stone, and shadows retreat into corners. The novice straightens, fingers still pressed to the cross, knuckles white. The scribe exhales, smudged ink on trembling hands, eyes lifted to the ceiling as if seeking divine witness. The monks rise, weary, trembling, their whispers now softer, tentative, yet steadying. The monastery, scarred but unbroken, listens to its own memory, the prayers, the screams, the ink-stained testimony a night that history may forget. The corridor breathes, the stones hum, the rafters settle. Outside, the fog swallows the traces of the invaders, but inside, the monastery holds them, immortal in shadow and flame. And in the silence that follows, there is a pulse, faint but undeniable, carrying hope and grief intertwined. The night has passed, but it has left traces in the trembling hearts of survivors, in the ink of the scribe, in the stone that endured. And these traces, small as they may seem, will guide what comes next: survival, memory, and faith, all poised to clash once more against the shadow that waits beyond the walls.